So, because that'll lead on to there's other people on this show that
Sure.
they've done that,
Let's talk about Camacho. Of course,
right?
Camacho's
Because
gone on since
since
NXT
then, right?
to New Japan Pro Wrestling as a huge part of one of the biggest boom periods of the last few years of the Bullet
Yes,
Club, and he's done extremely well for himself and
yeah,
has quite the pedigree as well.
exactly. Pedigree is one thing, but the whole family, um, absolute credit to this industry. And Donny, as I still call him when I do see him, incredible pro. Just watching him, watching the quality of their wrestling last night, and watching the little things that I see that a lot of people maybe don't, but really exceptionally good pro, exceptionally good pro, and a lovely, lovely lad. And he was somebody who everybody at NXT um, listened to, a lot of the younger people, because he carries this, and it's not you, you know, there's a lot of these stories and about Tonga, his father Ming. It is a gentleman who carries himself like a pro, and that's what he is. And his sons are all the same, absolute gentlemen and pros. It's not about anybody. You should have every right to fear them as far as the way they are, but you don't. They have admiration from the word respect and admiration from their colleagues because of the way they carry themselves, not because they go around acting like tough guys. They are incredible humans. And watching him last night, uh, he was one of the people that I really I don't know what I wished I could tell you, or well, I'd say I wouldn't tell you, but I don't know why it, things didn't work out for him, because he's about as everything that you could want. Looks the part, wrestles the part, is the part, perfect pro in every way. Just last night watching his pins. I mean, I'm a bit of a pin freak. I like my pins to look good. I believe pins are the foundation of what we do. We are portraying trained professional fighters with instinct. You know that you can beat somebody with a pin, and his pins were all spot on. He was covering both shoulders. I'm not going to get too much into this because things aren't as they used to be. But you can tell from the way his family has a history in the wrestling business of the way he just pins people. He pins people because that is, if you're a pro, why wouldn't you make sure there's weight on both shoulders of your
If you're trying
opponent?
to win,
You're
right? If you're
trying
trying
to
to
win,
win,
yes.
you
Unless
wanna
it's
make sure you
absolute,
can pin them.
unless it's absolute, you've knocked them out,
Mhm.
and then they're not going to get up. Then you don't have to worry about your pin so much, or it's a desperation, a long, long time into a match when you can just drape an arm over something, when it's just desperation. But otherwise, your pins should be everything covered. There should be, and reasons you don't just hook a leg and bring it to somebody's stomach. The reason you hook a leg is to drag their hip off the floor, which stacks their body weight on their shoulders. And I'm a bit of a pin freak. And one thing I will say, and people can laugh or not, and I don't care because I think I've earned my right to say this. More people should take notice of the pins, because I hear silly people, and I don't want to say silly, but just because nobody pulls them up over this stuff. I hear JR, Jim Ross, sometimes call out people on the pins. And I will do, if you look back on a lot of my commentary, and we'll hear, if you listen to any of the early NXT stuff, if I'm not seeing a correct pin, instead of I'm going to say why. And Jim on AEW now will say why. And talent shouldn't get offended at that, they think that he's burying them. They should look at that and go, perhaps I should tighten my pins up a little bit, because he can't kill his credibility as an announcer, and I wouldn't as much as an announcer, it by calling something look at it, a great pin when there's nothing covering either shoulder when you're trying to pin somebody. I'm not going to go too deep into this because it is a thing with me that I know that a fight scene in a movie is what actually happens is the stuntman misses by about 6 inches when he hits somebody. But if you saw that on the fight scene in a movie, you wouldn't watch it. And you not doing proper pins on people, that's basically treating your audience with disrespect, in my opinion. So I'm going to leave that and let people create all kinds of fuss about that I'm betting. I'm not. It's because it's nobody's fault. It's just that I come from a time where all the wrestlers that I wrestled in a day when we had to keep, it was a saying in Britain, keeping the strength of the business, keeping the strength of the job. And you can watch even the worst of old British wrestling that you can find from the World of Sport era. You will never see a bad pin. You will never see somebody not have something on a shoulder somewhere. And if there was, and when I was wrestling as a teenager, if I didn't have something, even if it was just a finger on the person's arm, the people I was wrestling would just lift their arm up instantly. They were, unless I had either their body weight stacked on them or my knee across the shoulder, or a recent thing that I saw the other night on AEW, young David Finlay, who obviously I've known. In fact, we used to babysit him. My wife used to babysit him. It was weird. I still find it weird when I see him. There's a pin that he does on there where he's got his knee on one shoulder, he's got his full body weight on. It's called a full body press, and it was like, don't have to tell him about his pins. I used to tell a lot of people in NXT after everybody had told them how great the matches were. I say, right, can I have a word with you? And I look, your pins weren't so good, and they went, oh yeah, you've taught me. And it's nobody. It's just because nobody's drilled it into them. And I don't expect everybody to change this because I don't know if it's too far gone now. But I believe we should give our audience the best thing possible. And also the announcers the best product so they can put you over. And if you're not putting your everything into your pin and you're just lying across their belly and there's nothing on either shoulder, unless they're knocked out or completely, you're both exhausted at the end of a very long match, why wouldn't you, as a portraying a trained professional fighter with instinct, instantly lift your shoulder off the floor, knowing that if the referee counts it, you would not make as much money because you've lost.
Right.
Right.
Certainly makes sense.
Right. So I've got that out the way because I am a bit of a pin freak, but everybody in this day and age could definitely take lessons on how to pin people and because you'll find if you always pin somebody like your life depends on it, because it does. If you think about it, if you in reality and you kick out like your life depends on it, it will never look bad. Right. And that's as much as I'm going to, because again, I don't like giving away my tricks and I don't like ruining things for people, but it's just something that young wrestlers should learn how to do. Right. There's people up legs and they're not hooking the leg. They bring the knee to the chest. That's not doing anything to stop those shoulders getting off the floor. You need to stack the rip up. If you're covering the body, you need to have some weight on both shoulders. You need to have an arm on the other shoulder. You need to have a forearm. You need to have a knee arm covering the arm closest to you, or your body weight or and a lot of people do that thing, and I was the one that popularized it in America. Everybody does it now, but it was stuff that nearly all European wrestlers did. The bar across the face, but if you watch, everything else is pinned. There's an hand on the far shoulder. There's a knee covering their arm on the shoulder closest to me, and not just me. I'm not talking about me. I'm talking about any of the older. It's just
Sure.
that's the way it is. Unless you are knocked out, then it's a different thing. So that's my little thing on that. But Donny Camacho in this, all his pins are top rate. So uh, I'm going off on these tangents because I want to try and, without, it's hard for me to talk open shop about
Well,
a lot of
that's
things, but I want it without going. I what I can do. I'm not the greatest of illusionists. If you equate this to magic, there's two types of magicians. There's people who do big illusions, and then there's close up card magic. Well, I'm better at close up card magic. If you can do it all, if you can do it all, then you're great, right? You've got it all. But one of the fundamental things of our job is pins, and so if nothing else, get that right. You can do what, and it's got nothing to do with what style you do. I'm not knocking in. I love all styles of wrestling as long as there's effort. But there's no style of wrestling that can't be bettered by having better pins, right? There's a
absolutely
point. There's actually a point in this one of these matches, and I've made a note of it somewhere, where somebody does what I call a double leg Nelson. When people do a sunset flip, the actual pin where their shoulders are out, and you should put your feet over their shoulders to keep the shoulders down. At one point in this in takeover, there's 1 foot off, and I actually call it out. I say if that person would have had their foot on the shoulder, it would have been harder for their opponent to kick out. Well, the actual pin part of it is nobody knows that here, but it's a double leg Nelson. A Nelson is anything where you're involving the shoulders. So two feet on the shoulders. I see a lot of people doing it with the feet out here, nothing on the shoulders. Now, if they've been smashed into the ground, maybe they can't lift the shoulders up. But if it's not, maybe you need to get your feet on the shoulders. And why I'm saying this is because I know there are a lot of old wrestlers out there that want to knock all the young wrestlers. I don't. I want to help you all. I wished I could just go here. Have everything that's in my brain because there's so much of it. Don't give these old wrestlers who want to moan about anything any ammunition to moan about. Just make your tricks better. If you made your tricks better, maybe they wouldn't moan so much. You might not care, or you might laugh at them. But there's a lot to be learned from older wrestlers, because older wrestlers from the 80s and before that had to go back to the same place every week or every month, most of them weekly, whether it be in territories or when I was in Britain, it was most shows were either every fortnight, every 2 weeks, or every month through the actual show. So people get to see you all the time. Well, people get to see you all the time now on TV. They get to
right.
see your stuff every week. So you might be as hot as you can be, but after a while, somebody will come along who maybe is the person who does better pins than everybody else. And people start noticing it. And then all of a sudden, your stock starts coming down. Shouldn't you be trying to up your game a little bit? And by upping your game, you'll just keep more people's attention on you. And it's all the stuff that I can help you with is not something you're ever going to get any praise for. That's the problem with reading people's opinions of yourself, because again, you don't hear about close-up magicians, do you? You hear
Yeah.
about illusionists. It's people, David Blaine, and people who do the big things that get all the praise, right? You don't hear about the incredible close-up magician. We shouldn't really notice in a magician sense, you should, but in wrestling, you shouldn't notice the in-between stuff that just looks better. You shouldn't see the little things that, but it builds it. When you do the big things at the end of that, it makes, it will make that big thing mean more. Okay, I will leave my last little magic thing. This will be a very niche thing for people, but we a lot of, we really are in the same business. We can be illusionists, or we can be close-up card magicians, or close-up magic people, or we can be the same thing. We've got to entertain our audience, and we should be giving our audience the best possible. You know, if it's a big illusion, I don't want to see the wires at the back. I don't want to. If it's close-up magic, if you have to see, you know, if you see the slightest bit, and it's really on top of you. Well, you think about it, cameras are on you all the time, and they can see through things that don't look right. And your announcers then can't talk about, if it doesn't look right, they're not going to talk about that not looking right. They're going to talk about something else, right? So there's there's illusions and there's close-up card magic. Again, the close-up card magic, or the close-up detail of your wrestling, nobody's going to talk about. Years ago, I would imagine even the younger audience, if they're listening to this 54-year-old man go on about pins now, years ago, there was two equally famous magicians. One of them was called Harry Houdini, who I think even the younger people will know his name. And then the other one was called Harry Blackstone. And there's only the magicians or people who studied that know about Harry Blackstone, but he was equally as famous, but he was mostly a close-up magician. Houdini did these big stunts. Well, Harry Blackstone used to say of Houdini, Houdini couldn't put his hands in the middle of Central Park without rustling the leaves. Okay? I'll let you take out what you want to take from that. I was always taught, and kept my wrestling was kept honest by the people that I wrestled when I was younger, that they wouldn't let me do things that didn't look right. I had to learn how to do everything looking right. But I do know, and you hopefully by now you've known that I really don't, it's not an ego thing for me. I do know you can watch stuff of mine from when I came to WCW, and it still holds up, and you still can't see through those tricks. And that was me at 24 and 25.
Absolutely.
Right? You won't see a bad pin. You won't see any pin where, and if it is somebody, if I couldn't get the pin on right, this bothers me to have to say that I think so. I do like, but I would say, kick out instantly. Don't lie there while this pin's not on right. I would tell, but I don't want to see anybody to see me not putting a good pin on. Again, you're not going to get any praise for that. You just, because it's the illusions, right? Another last little thing about, and you can take all these things how you want to take. I'm just trying to give you lessons without exposing our business. It was about 15 years ago, there was a documentary came on, not a documentary, a show. They still show it on cable TV, The Masked Magician, and he exposed all the tricks of all the Vegas illusionists, right?
Sure.
And it put a lot of them out of business because they were multi-million-dollar effects. These illusions cost a lot of money. It put a lot of those fellas out that were doing that, and people in that industry out of business. Penn and Teller just reinvented the trick. You take what you want to take out of that.
Absolutely.
That's what wrestling is. If whatever you're doing now, and I don't care how big of a star you are, whatever you're doing now, you've got to keep up, because there's going to be somebody coming along. You need to keep working on your craft and reinventing the trick, or reinventing something about it. Well, that's why I just want to give, first of all, give Camacho his props, because he did an excellent. It looked like there's another thing that looked like two grown men having a wrestling contest. That was another thing that stands out. They both look like fighters, even though Adam Rose did the character. When it was time to go, that's that. We started off this talking about body language and different things. They all had to be what you are. And Camacho, great with because of just me seeing how good his pins were, hopefully that's taught some people some lessons. So let's move on, because this is what
Oh,
happens when you start on one thing.
oh,
I go off into all these tangents, and it's
well,
I'm trying to educate everybody.
I think that's definitely one of the things that people love about the show, and something we've got the most comments on is people do love learning about this, and where I saw a promoter, with Black Label Pro, Mikey, who tweeted, "Hey, man, if you're a young wrestler, you need to listen to this show," and it's because of advice like that